My name is Elena, and I was 33 when I learned that 7 years of holding a building together could be released with a single breath. Not with a shout, not a yint, and not a you, and not not with a slammed door, with a manila envelope, a notary stamp, and a filing date that had already passed while they were still choosing their earrings. I want to be clear about what this story is. It is not a revenge fantasy. There are no poisoned blueprints, no burned models lit for spectacle, no cinematic monologue delivered through tears. It is the sound of a machine stopping, because one person stopped oiling it. The machine in this case was a family. My family. They ran a small architecture firm, Reyes Design Group, 3 projects at a time, held in an LLC that bore my brother's name like a vanity plate on a car he had not paid for. For 7 years, I had been the one who drafted the structural plans, managed the permit applications, trained the junior architects, and kept the firm bonded and insured. My brother Matteo held the title of principal architect. I held a professional architecture license I had earned 6 years earlier, a credential his name could not legally carry because he had never passed the R. They knew this. They had known it for years. What they did not know was that I had already filed a change of architect of record with the state licensing board. The form was dated February 14th. The compliance review was scheduled for March 15th. And on March 12th, my family invited a developer to tour the firm over brunch, hoping to sell a $14,000 monthly retainer they had not earned without me. I was invited too. They thought I was coming to arrange the charcuterie. Visual. A school auditorium, a blue ribbon, a boy's new bicycle. I was 11 the first time I understood that my hands were useful to them, in a way my voice was not. The spring I turned 11, the district held its first middle school science fair, and my parents entered Matteo, who was 13 and had never drawn a straight line without a ruler, complaining, because they said the fair was good for the firm's profile. I spent 3 nights at the kitchen table after dinner, perfecting a model of a suspension bridge from balsa wood and dental floss, with a deck that held 2 pounds of weight and towers that stood true to plumb. Matteo watched a basketball game while the glue dried. On the day of the judging, I carried the model to the auditorium in a cardboard box, still smelling of wood stain, the weight of it making red marks on my forearms. My mother patted my knee and said I was her little helper, that she didn't know what they would do without me. At the judging table, the organizer asked who had designed the entry. My father stepped forward and said Matteo had developed the concept, that he was learning the family business, that his son had a real head for design. Matteo stood beside him in a clean shirt, smiling at the judges, while I was sent to the back to organize the display table. The bridge won a $200 prize. Matteo accepted it with a speech about innovation and tradition that he had rehearsed in the car. That night, the $200 bought Matteo a new bicycle, a red 10-speed with curved handlebars. I received a $10 bill and a pat on the head. I did not cry in front of them. I cried in the firm's storage room, surrounded by rolls of trace paper, because my mother had said, "Elena's always been our foundation." Why would we change that? She said it while sorting the mail, not looking up, the way you note that the dishwasher is running, or that the mail has come. I was useful. I was not worth a ribbon. Visual. A drafting table, a shoebox of receipts, a calculator dodge. I was 16 when I found the $3,200 deduction. My father had bought a second plot of land that fall, a corner lot near the university, and he was drowning in receipts he had shoved into a shoebox, labeled taxes, in black marker. The box sat on the drafting table for 3 weeks. I organized them alphabetically, then chronologically, then found the depreciation schedule he had forgotten to file for the new surveying equipment and the energy rebate from the October utility audit. $3,200. That was the exact difference between my father owing the IRS $1,200 and getting a refund of $2,000 that spring. He clapped me on the shoulder at dinner and told my mother I had a real head for business, that I was a natural. I asked if I could be added to the business checking account so I could pay the engineering invoices directly instead of waiting 3 days for him to find his checkbook and sign every bill. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. "Elena's always been our foundation," she said. "Mateo needs to learn the financial side for his college applications." Why would we change that? I looked at my father. He was already talking to Mateo about his batting average. The $3,200 saved the firm that year. It paid for Mateo's summer baseball camp. My name did not appear on a single document, not the LLC filing, not the bank account, not the property deed. I was useful. I was not worth a signature. Visual, an architecture diploma, a train ticket, a crossed-out date. I graduated from architecture school at 24 with a Master of Architecture and an offer to join a firm in the city, 40 minutes north by train, a place with a portfolio that people wrote articles about. The same week, my mother had a bad turn with her blood pressure. Nothing catastrophic, the doctor said, but she needed to reduce stress and avoid early mornings and heavy lifting. My father called me into the kitchen the Sunday after her release and said the firm needed a project manager, just for now, just until my mother was back on her feet and feeling like herself again. Mateo was 26, working at a real estate development company across town, building his client network, as my mother put it, her voice lifting on the word network like it was a fragile thing that needed protection. He was too busy. I was not too busy. I was available. That was the word she used. Available. As if I were a conference room. As if I had no edges. I moved back into my childhood bedroom, the one with the faded wallpaper and the desk that still had my high school graduation program in the drawer. I took the train 40 minutes each way to my firm job and handled the raised projects at night, sitting on the edge of my bed with a laptop that overheated and a phone that rang until 11. I drafted plans. I managed permits. I fixed the plotter at midnight with a YouTube video and a screwdriver I bought myself because the maintenance budget my father set was imaginary. For 7 years, this was the rhythm. 7 years. I want you to hold that number. 2,555 days, more or less, of being the one who answered the phone when a contractor had a question at 2 in the morning, who drove to the site in ice storms to check the foundation, because my father couldn't lift the bags of concrete, who learned the state building codes by heart because no one else would read them. The personal cost was not the labor I could do in my sleep by year 3. The cost was the life I did not build while I was oiling the machine. Visual, a studio apartment listing, a red pen crossing out a date. At 26, I had saved $5,000 and found a studio apartment 4 blocks from the firm, with a window that faced east and a radiator that clanked but worked. I gave notice at home. I packed 2 suitcases. My mother cried, "Nice." Not hard, not with noise, just enough to make the air in the kitchen feel heavy and wet, the way it feels before a summer storm. She said my father still wasn't strong enough to handle the stress of new projects, that Mateo was up for a promotion and couldn't be distracted by promotion, and couldn't be distracted by permit delays, that the clients only trusted me, that I was the only one who knew the CAD software password, and the name of the reliable surveyor, and the exact day the city inspector liked to visit. She did not say, "Please stay." She said, "Elena's always been our foundation." I unpacked my suitcases. The studio went to a junior architect named Priya, who worked 2 floors above me. I watched her carry a fern into the building from the train window. I stayed for 3 more years. At 29, I met someone. His name was Marcus. He taught structural engineering at the community college and laughed at my jokes about load-bearing walls, a laugh that made other people in the coffee shop turn to look. We dated for 11 months. He had a small house with a porch swing and a dog that tolerated me. He wanted me to move in with him after the holidays. I wanted to. But the January permit renewals were due, and the site plan for the university project had a zoning issue that required daily check-ins with the planning department because my father had chosen the cheapest consultant. My mother had started introducing Marcus as Elena's friend from the office even after I corrected her twice at Sunday dinner. Marcus asked me once directly why Mateo's name was on the LLC paperwork when I was the one who handled every crisis. I did not have an answer that sounded sane outside my own head. I said I was helping the family. He looked at me for a long time. He left after 13 months. Not dramatically. No slammed doors. He just stopped asking me to choose him. I did not blame him. I had not chosen him. I had chosen the permit applications, the zoning appeals, the family that needed me to be available. No, for 7 years. Visual. A state board seminar, a stack of pamphlets, a notepad. The mechanism was born in a state board seminar I attended alone on a Tuesday night in January. I was 32. The state had passed a new Professional Practice Act, effective January 1st, requiring every licensed architecture firm to have an architect of record who held a current license from the state board and who was the designated professional responsible for all stamped drawings and permit applications. The license required a professional degree, a national exam, and a state jurisprudence test. Mateo had never taken it. He had never intended to. I had passed the air in 2018, after a city planner questioned a foundation detail, and I realized I needed legal standing to sign drawings under my own license. I passed on the first attempt. My license number was R 3347. I was the only person in my family who could legally stamp drawings for the firm under the new act. The state clerk explained that existing designations would expire on March 15th unless renewed with the licensed architect's signature and a notarized affidavit of active practice. I sat in the back row with a notepad and wrote down every deadline. Mateo sat at home watching a basketball game. My mother had asked me to go because, as she said, I was the one who understood that kind of thing. She did not ask what the act meant. She assumed I would handle it. She was correct. But I understood something else that night. The act created a paper trail. It required the state to keep a public record of the architect of record. And it allowed any licensed architect to file a change of designation with 30 days' notice, provided they could demonstrate they had been performing the duty. I had 7 years of stamped drawings, permit applications, and inspection reports with my signature on them. I had a waiver. It's boring. It was legal. It was mine. A visual, a magazine cover, a man in a hard hat, a framed newspaper article. The erasure did not happen all at once. It accrued, like interest on a debt no one intended to pay. In January of my 33rd year, a local business journal featured Matteo as the visionary architect behind Reyes Design Group's urban renaissance. The photographer shot him at a construction site wearing a hard hat with his name on it, holding a set of blueprints over a steel frame. The blueprints were my drawings. The steel frame was from my foundation plan. The article quoted him at length about his philosophy of space. He spoke for 12 minutes without mentioning a single load calculation, a single soil test, or the fact that the university project had been delayed for 3 weeks because the zoning board had questions only I could answer. My mother framed the article. My father sent the link to every relative. I was mentioned once, in the final paragraph, as the dedicated drafting support that keeps the plans moving. I read it while dimensioning a stairwell, the pencil still in my hand. By then, the form was already sitting in a file downtown, waiting. I just hadn't decided if I would use it. Visual, a bank lobby, a glass conference room, a business party. The second incident happened 2 weeks later. My mother asked me to accompany Matteo to the bank to help him organize the financials for the developer's review. She said it casually, while folding blueprints, as if she were asking me to pick up milk. I brought my laptop, my external drive, and a binder of records I had maintained for 7 years, every permit log pressed flat, every drawing annotated in the margins with structural notes and material specifications. The loan officer, a woman named Denise, with silver hair and a charcoal suit, asked Matteo about the structural certifications. Matteo hesitated, and he looked at me. I answered. I explained the seismic calculations, the wind load analysis, the foundation specifications, and the inspection protocol for the last 3 projects. Denise turned to me, genuinely impressed, and asked if I was the architect of Redcore. Matteo laughed. It was a sound I knew well, the laugh he used when he was uncomfortable and wanted to reclaim the room. He said I was his assistant, that I helped out with the drafting, that he was the principal, but he liked to keep his sister busy. He said it like a joke between professionals. Denise did not laugh. She looked at me for 1 second, longer than was polite. I looked at the binder. I had color-coded the project histories by quarter. I had highlighted the $14,632 in personal funds. I had advanced to cover engineering fees during the 6-month slump in 2022, the months Matteo had been in Napata. I had not listed those advances as loans. I had listed them as operational support in the ledger, language that made them sound voluntary. Matteo signed the bank disclosure forms with a pen I had brought from my apartment. My name appeared nowhere on the documents, not even as a witness. Denise handed him her business card. He did not hand me one. I drove home in silence while Matteo talked about the boat he might buy with his share, a 22-foot center console he had already picked out online. I stared at the road and thought about the State Board Act. I thought about my license number, R 2018 3347. I thought about how easy it would be to file a single form with a notary public and a postage stamp. How easy, and how permanent. Visual, A state board office. A notary stamp pressing into paper. I filed the form on February 14th. I took a personal day from the firm, the first one I had used in 11 months. I told no one. Not my mother, not Matteo, not the junior architect who covered my desk. I drove to the state board office with a folder of proof. 7 years of stamped drawings with my signature as the architect of record, permit applications paid from my personal account, inspection reports prepared by my hand, and my license card laminated in plastic. The clerk was a woman named Gloria, with reading glasses on a chain and a cough that rattled in her chest. She reviewed the documents for 14 minutes without speaking. She said the change of architect of record would be processed within 5 business days, and the new certificate would be mailed to the address on file. I gave her my apartment address, not the family house on Birch Street. She did not ask why. She stamped the form with a sound like a door closing and handed me a carbon copy. I paid the $40 filing fee with my own debit card. I kept the receipt. I had already mailed the form. It was sitting in a file downtown, waiting. Then I went to the post office and sent a certified letter to the developer's attorney, Patricia Vance, whose name I had found on the development company's website under due diligence team. The letter was 1 page, single-spaced, with no greeting beyond the formal address. It stated that as of March 1st, the designated architect of record for Reyes Design Group LLC had changed pursuant to State Act 14B, and that contract, inspection, or transfer of professional liability required my signature and physical presence by state law. I did not threaten, and I did not plead. I did not explain my reasons. I stated facts in the flattest language I knew, the language of regulators and clerks. I kept the certified mail receipt with its tracking number. I kept the stamped copy of the filing. I kept the $40 receipt in an envelope labeled RDG, administrative. I went home and made a cup of tea and sat on my couch and waited for March 12th. The family did not know. They were planning the brunch menu. They were planning the sale. They were planning to hand me the napkins and ask me to check the cream. Visual. A hotel conference room. A silver coffee service. A pastry display. March 12th arrived cold and bright, a morning that felt like a promise no one asked for. My mother had rented the conference room at the hotel because she said it impressed developers, gave them a sense of the professionalism they were buying into, vision that came from attention to detail. There were white tablecloths and a silver coffee service and a platter of pastries from the bakery Matteo liked, the one that charged $6 for a croissant. I arrived at 10:45, wearing a charcoal dress I had bought for a conference 3 years ago, and never worn because my mother had called that morning to say my father was having a bad day, and could I please check the site plan for the university project. My mother kissed my cheek and told me to make sure the cream was fresh and to set out the sugar cubes, not the packets, because Jeffrey Whitfield was a man who noticed details. Matteo wore a navy suit that cost more than my monthly rent, the suit he had bought with the bonus from his development company after I had covered the insurance premium that December. My father stood by the window, practicing his handshake in the glass reflection, his palm opening and closing like a fish gasping. The developer arrived at 11 o'clock exactly. His name was Jeffrey Whitfield. He was 60, maybe 65, with a tan that looked expensive and a watch that caught the light and held it like a threat. He brought his attorney, Patricia Vance, a black woman in a burgundy blazer who carried a leather folio, and did not smile when she shook Mateo's hand. She looked at me as she entered the room. I was standing by the coffee station. I nodded. She nodded back. It was a small movement, barely visible, but it held weight I could feel in my collarbone. My mother poured the coffee into china cups. I did not touch the pot. I did not move to help her. Mateo launched into his presentation, a slideshow on a laptop I had configured for him the night before. The slides I had designed with the project charts I had compiled from 7 years of data. He talked about cash flow. He talked about design integrity. He talked about his hands-on management style and his personal relationships with the city planners. He had met 2 planners in 7 years. I had met all of them. My mother beamed at him like he was a photograph she had always wanted to frame. My father nodded along, his eyes watery with pride or wine. Patricia Vance took notes with a fountain pen that scratched against the paper. She asked one question while Mateo was mid-sentence about projected yields. Who holds the current architecture license for this firm? Mateo waved his hand as if brushing away a fly. I oversee all of that, he said. My sister helps with the drafting, but I'm the principal on every document. Patricia Vance stopped writing. She looked at me again, her eyes level and calm. I was still holding my manila envelope. My fingers were not shaking. Oh. Visual. A china cup, a fountain pen resting on a legal pad. Mateo's answer hung in the air like smoke from a blown candle. Jeffrey Whitfield smiled, a smile that meant he was ready to move to numbers, to unit costs and delivery schedules, the part of the meeting where men like him felt most at home. My mother filled the silence before it could become awkward. Elena's always been our foundation, she said, turning to Jeffrey with a hostess's grace, as if she were explaining why the napkins matched the curtains or why the flowers were white. She's been doing the day-to-day for, 7 years now? She laughed, a sound like silverware settling. We always say she's the engine and Mateo is the steering wheel. My father chuckled into his coffee. Mateo straightened his tie and let the metaphor sit there, let it grow roots in the room. Jeffrey Whitfield looked at me with a new expression, the look of a man who has just been told where the bathroom is. A brief acknowledgement before returning to the important people. Patricia Vance did not look at me. She looked at Mateo with the flat patience of someone who has heard this particular lie before. Mr. Nasalai Reyes, she said, her voice even and unhurried. Are you stating that you personally hold the state architecture license required under Act 14B? Mateo's smile faltered for half a second, a crack in the glaze. I hold the management title, he said. The license is a formality. My sister took the exams, but I run the business. I make the decisions. My mother touched Jeffrey Whitfield's arm, a gesture of reassurance. Elena's always been our foundation, she said. Why would we change that? The phrase again. The phrase again. The exact words, delivered with the same casual cruelty as the day she had denied me the science fair ribbon, the same dismissive music as the night she had kept me from the studio apartment. I felt them land in my sternum like a bookmark placed in a chapter I had already read 100 times and was now ready to close. Patricia Vance closed her folio. The snap of leather was the only sound in the room for 2 full seconds. Jeffrey Whitfield looked at his attorney, confused, his smile dimming. My mother was still talking about my thoroughness, my reliability, my availability, the way I never took vacations and answered my phone at midnight. She was selling my labor as a feature of the firm, like a new plotter or a renovated conference room or a reliable foundation plan. Matteo joined in, explaining that I would of course stay on through the transition, that I was part of the package, that the developer would find me invaluable, that he had already factored my continued management into the pro forma. He said it without asking me. Now I should admit, we were sucked cuts. He said it as if he were offering a tool that came with the building, a drafting table or a set of T-squares. I set my envelope on the table. The sound was soft. Paper against cloth. It was enough. Visual. A manila envelope. A hand sliding documents across mahogany dyed in. I need to correct the record, I said. My voice was level even. The same tone I used when telling a contractor that their change order would not be approved. I had practiced the sentence in my car on the drive over, speaking it to the steering wheel until it sounded like weather, like a forecast, like something that simply was. I opened the envelope. The flap made a clean tearing sound. I slid the first document across the table to Patricia Vance. It was the certified copy of the change of architect of record form, filed with the State Board on February 14th and processed on March 1st, bearing the clerk's stamp and my signature in blue ink. This is the change of architect of record form, I said, filed with the State Board on February 14th and processed on March 1st. The previous designation of Matteo Reyes was terminated by operation of Act 14B, which requires the licensed architect to be the designated professional of record. I slid the second document. It was my architecture license. Number R 2018, 3347. Issued 6 years ago, current through next December, with my photograph laminated in the corner. This is my architecture license, I said. Number R 2018, 347. I passed the R in 2018. I passed on the first attempt. My brother has never held an architecture license. Neon. Do you? I slid the third document, a spreadsheet printed on green paper. This is a ledger of operational contributions from my personal funds to Reyes Design Group, LLC, over the last 7 years, I said, totaling $14,632. None of these have been repaid. None were documented as loans in the LLC operating agreement. They were drawn from my personal savings to cover engineering fees, permit shortfalls, and insurance premium delinquencies that occurred when the LLC account was empty. Matteo laughed. It was a high, nervous sound, the laugh of a child caught in a lie he thought was too small to matter. Elena, what is this? He said. Are you having some kind of episode? My mother looked at my father, her eyes wide and wet. My father looked at the documents as if they were written in a language he had never learned to read, his mouth slightly open, his hand hovering over his chest. I did not look at any of them. I looked at Patricia Vance. She was reading the filing with a concentration that excluded the rest of the room, her finger moving down the page line by line. She turned to Jeffrey Whitfield. Now, Mr. No, the cup tea. Whitfield, she said, her voice carrying the weight of her 15 years of practicing law. According to the Secretary of State filing and the State Board records, which I verified this morning, Ms. Reyes has been the certified architect of record since March 1st. Mr. Reyes has no active architecture license on file. No. Under the Purchase Agreement's Representation and Warranties Clause, This constitutes a material misrepresentation in the sale disclosures. The buyer is entitled to terminate due diligence immediately. Jeffrey Whitfield's face changed. The tan did not look expensive anymore. It looked like a mask that had slipped. "Mateo," he said. "Is this true? You told me you ran this operation personally." Mateo stood up. His chair scraped the floor with a sound like a scream. "She's my sister," he said, his voice rising. "She works for me. This is a family misunderstanding. She's upset about the contract, that's all. She's emotional." Patricia Vance did not look up from the ledger. She turned a page. "Ms. Reyes," she said, "did you file this change of designation independently, without coercion?" I did," I said. "Did you personally perform the management duties listed in the affidavit of active practice?" "For 7 years," I said. "Every drawing, every permit, every inspection, every 3 a.m. call from a contractor with a foundation question." My mother made a sound, not quite a word, more like air escaping a tire. My father's hand was shaking. "One." He knocked over his coffee cup. The brown liquid spread across the white linen, like a map of something breaking open. Mateo was shouting now. Something about loyalty, about blood, about how I had embarrassed him in front of a client, how I had sabotaged the family. His voice was the only loud thing in the room, bouncing off the hotel walls. I did not raise mine. I did not stand. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the last document, a single sheet of plain paper. "This is my resignation from all informal and formal management duties related to Reyes Design Group LLC," I said. Effective immediately. I am terminating my access to the CAD software, the LLC supplier accounts, and the permit tracking portal. I am also notifying all clients and contractors that all future communications should be directed to the principal on file, as listed with the Secretary of State. I placed it on the table next to the spreading coffee stain. "No, I did it too." Jeffrey Whitfield stood up. He did not look at Mateo. He looked at me, and then at Patricia Vance, and then he picked up his own folio. "I think we're done here," he said. My mother reached for my arm. I moved my chair back. "Elena," she said. "Elena, please." I looked at her. I looked at the coffee spreading across the table. I looked at Mateo, who was still standing, his face red, his hands open and empty. I picked up my empty envelope. I walked out of the room. No one followed me. Not then. I stopped. Foundations can be moved. Visual. A laptop screen. A red login error message. I did not go home. I went to my apartment and changed into jeans and a sweatshirt and sat on my couch with a cup of tea that I let cool while I worked. Then I began the withdrawal. I changed the password on the CAD software. The account was in my name, paid for with my personal credit card for the last 4 years because Mateo said the LSC couldn't afford the $119 monthly fee, and my father had agreed. I canceled the auto renewal. I exported the project files to my personal external drive and deleted the master files from the shared cloud folder. I logged into the LLC bank account, which I had accessed for 7 years because I was the one who balanced the transactions and caught the errors, and I removed my authorized user status through the online portal. The bank sent an automatic notification to the primary account holder, my father, that a user had been removed and that pending transactions might be affected. I did not answer my phone when it rang 30 minutes later, my mother's name bright on the screen. I let it ring until the voicemail picked up. Oh. I changed the outgoing message on the firm line, the number I had carried in my pocket for 7 years, to a generic message directing all calls to Matteo's cell phone, which he never answered before noon. Then I stopped. Nay, I had not destroyed anything. I had not hidden information they could not legally obtain. I had simply stopped holding the door open with my shoulder. The machine began to break immediately, the way a clock stops when you stop winding it. Without the software, Matteo could not access the project files to schedule the inspection Jeffrey Whitfield had demanded before closing, nor could he prove the structural certifications he had claimed. Without my signature on the insurance forms, the broker could not renew the professional liability policy, which was due in 19 days, and which I had prepared every quarter for 7 years. Without my personal funds covering the gap between the client payments and the engineering bills, the March auto draft bounced for the first time in 4 years, triggering a late fee of $230 and a notice of default risk from the lender. I did not cause these things. I simply stopped preventing them. I stopped oiling the machine. Visual: a phone screen, 7 missed calls, a kitchen table at night with 1 lamp on. The fallout took 2 weeks to fully arrive, spreading like water, finding every crack in the floor. Jeffrey Whitfield terminated the letter of intent on March 14th, citing material misrepresentation and failure to disclose the true management structure. The development firm's attorney sent a formal notice to Matteo, copied to my father, outlining the discrepancies in the financial disclosures, the lack of licensed management, and the $14,632 in undocumented liability. The bank, alerted by the bounce draft and the late fee, called the commercial loan due for review and required a full financial audit before the next payment cycle. My father left me 4 voicemails, each one louder than the last. Matteo left 11, the first 3 demanding, the next 4 pleading, the last 4 consisting mostly of silence and breathing. My mother left 3, that started with, "How could you do this to your father?" and ended with, "We need to talk as a family." I listened to none of them past the first 30 seconds. I deleted them one by one while eating toast at my kitchen counter. The accountant, a man named Gene, who had prepared the family taxes for a decade, and who had always emailed me directly because I was the one who provided the numbers, called me on March 20th. He was not angry. He was confused in a professional way, the way a surgeon might be confused if the patient walked out mid-operation. He said he could not file the LC return without the project cost documentation, the engineering receipts, and the depreciation schedules, which had always come from me in a green folder by the 15th of the month. I told him to contact Matteo. I told him Matteo was the principal. He paused. I could hear him clicking his pen. "Elena," he said, his voice dropping, "Matteo doesn't know the password to the accounting software. He doesn't even know which version we're running." "I know," I said. Visual: a building inspector's clipboard, a foundation crack. The city building inspector called Matteo directly to schedule the compliance review he was legally required to attend as the principal of record before the March 15th deadline. Matteo did not know what a compliance review entailed. He did not know the inspector's name was Roberto Santos. He did not know that the university project had a foundation crack the contractor had reported to me 2 months prior, which I had been managing with a temporary support and twice daily measurements because my father had refused to pay the $3,000 repair, saying we could wait until spring. The inspector found the crack during his routine walkthrough. He issued a stop work order and a notice of structural deficiency. The fine was $500. The repair estimate was $4,000, and the university threatened to withhold payment until the deficiency was cleared. My father called me again, this time from the urgent care clinic. His blood pressure was 190/110. He said the stress was killing him, that I was killing him, that a daughter should not do this to her family. I told him to call Matteo. I told him Matteo was the principal. I told him Matteo would handle it. No. I was calm. I was unbothered. I was free. Visual. A smartphone. 3 gray text bubbles on a screen. The phone calls slowed after a month, tapering like a tide going out and leaving things exposed on the sand. Then they changed. My mother called on a Tuesday in April and left a voicemail I did not return for 3 days, not out of spite, but because I was busy learning how to live without the sound of her voice in my ear. She said my father was fine. The blood pressure was managed with medication, and that they had hired a project manager to handle the firm because Matteo couldn't do it and work full-time at the development company. She said the manager's fees were eating into the profits, that he charged $150 an hour, which was highway robbery. She said Matteo was struggling at the company because of the stress from the contract falling through, that he had been passed over for the promotion he wanted. I did not apologize. She did not say she had been wrong. She said, we miss you at dinner. Sunday isn't the same. I did not call back. I texted 2 days later. I'm glad he's well. Take care. That was all. She did not text again. She did not text again. My father texted me in May. It was the first time he had texted me in 3 years, since he had sent me a picture of a sunrise that I had never asked for. The message was 3 sentences, written in the slow, punctuated style of a man who still treats texting like a telegram. I didn't know it was that bad. I thought you were helping because you wanted to. I should have asked. I read it sitting on my porch in the evening, the concrete still warm from the day. I read it 3 times. It was not an apology. It was a flicker, a small light in a dark room, enough to see the outline of something broken, but not enough to mend it, not enough to make it whole. I did not reply that day. I let the words sit with me. I replied the next morning while my coffee brewed. Thank you for saying that. He did not write back. I did not expect him to. Some doors, once opened, only show you the distance between where you are and where you used to be. Visual. A studio apartment. A bookshelf with 12 books. A blue mug. I live in a 1-bedroom now, 8 blocks from the firm where I work as a project architect, where I was promoted to senior designer in April, because I could finally stay late without a contractor calling about a missing detail. I have a fern on the windowsill that I water on Saturdays, and it has grown 3 new fronds since I bought it in April. I have a blue mug that I bought with my first paycheck after the reckoning, the first thing I had ever purchased just because I liked the color, not because it was on sale or because someone else needed it. I wake up early without an alarm. I make coffee in the blue mug. I read the newspaper at my small table without checking my phone for permit emergencies or LLC bank alert. On Sundays, I go to the farmer's market 3 streets over and buy vegetables I have never cooked before, eggplant and fennel and strange mushrooms, and I burn them sometimes. and I eat them anyway, because they are mine, and because no one is watching. I am learning to be alone without being lonely. It is slow. It is uneven. It is enough. My name is Elena. I am 34.